Hello, hello.
Hello from Flushing, New York.
Live from Flushing. Hang on, I'm getting on my all right, there we go. I had like a monitor so I could hear myself in my ear, but then it gets a little bit trippy. How was your ride? How are things in Flushing?
Flushing, let's start off with it's you always are good enough to give us a weather report from your
Yes.
neck of the woods. Well, let's start off with it's 44 degrees today and it's partly cloudy. So we are in a heat wave right now after experiencing sub-zero temperatures here.
And you rode today?
I rode today, yes, sir.
Oh man, so tell me so where the show hasn't technically started yet, we're just getting rolling here. So I want to know though, what do you have for heated gear? Like what do you how hard do you gear up for a 44-degree ride?
You know, um, I'm heated up with a vest, plugs into the bike. So, and the vest also has gloves that I can plug into. Also, that same vest gives me the opportunity to have pants, but I don't. I just end up using a thermals or long johns. I do wear then jeans that are padded. I say it's got quilt lining in it, and I throw on top. I put my Village People outfit on.
Yeah. Okay. So that's pretty well layered, but really, I mean, the only electrical gear you're wearing are gloves and a vest, you're saying?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that is correct. Yeah,
Now,
and,
when somebody says heated grips for a complete nub and for somebody who owns no electrically heated gear yet, is it the grips that actually heat up, or do you?
yeah,
Okay,
and which is an additional. Yeah, you can get away with being heated without getting the heated grips. That means the handlebars wiring has to go through the handlebars. The whole handlebars have to be come out. It's a cost. It's something that how much you want to sacrifice the heat versus cost.
right.
And it is basically the I had it on my Ultra Classic, and that's a touring bike. In which case, the heated grips is exactly that. You where you place your hands on the handlebars, there is a knob with volume control or temperature control, and it's about I believe it was about up to six settings,
Right.
and depending and that's correct connected directly to the battery, and um, and you just dial it up.
Okay. Yeah. So the wiring part, though, I had a brief conversation with one of the dudes that I ride with on Sunday sometimes, and he was telling me how his wife had bought him for Christmas, and it's a bit of a fiasco getting them wired, I guess, to after the fact. But maybe that's was just his ride. I don't know.
You know, and the challenge that I tell folks there about if you're gonna go and you're gonna do a lot of riding, see, I missed the opportunity to have the trike wired for heated grips only because it was there in the shop. It wasn't doing anything. They already had various things open and the battery and everything exposed. They were already going into the fairing to fix some lighting issues. So while everything is apart,
The patient's already
uh,
open. Why not? Right.
yeah, yeah, and that's the advice I usually give folks. Yes, is if you're going to have some sort of custom job, if you're going to have some sort of custom lighting,
Right.
have it done right the first time, then rather than anything else there, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, that's I've heard that from more than one person before, and I'm not wiring and that kind of stuff to me is I'm not an electrician, and just I've tried to pay attention on my own bike as I've tinkered with stuff to try to see like what leads to where and trying to make sense of it, but I really need to pull out that service manual and spend like an hour or two looking. I'm guessing there's a wiring schematic in there somewhere that would tell me a little bit about what does what.
Yeah, and you're lucky because on a Sportster, and it's not
There's no fairing to
there.
deal with.
Huh?
There's no fairing to deal with.
Yeah, this. I do miss one of my earlier rides in there where wiring was really a piece of cake.
Right.
You know that. Oh, okay, let's just run it underneath the seat or run it up the gas tank. And here it's not
Bust out a couple
quite.
of zip ties, bada bing, bada boom, and we're done.
And it's nothing like that. In fact, one of the guys today, one of my colleagues, this guy rides 24/7, 365 a year, rain, shine, 6 inches of snow. In fact, he was showing me how his bike was covered with like a foot of snow and he still was going out there. I mean, this guy's in, and
I get the sweats watching people watching like TikToks and Instagrams of video of people riding in the snow gives me the shakes, man.
yeah, and it takes the whole idea. I mean, if you want to ride, do you want to ride under tension? Do you want to ride under scare the crap out of you? Do you want to
No.
crap in your pants? I mean, come on. The whole idea of riding is to enjoy, live to ride to live, not get ready to die at a moment's notice.
Yeah, I get like I can understand that I tend to I always try to think of it from, the devil's advocate. Like I get there are certain kinds of people that really that type of challenge is something that they live for. Not me at all. I moved to San Diego in part because if I never drive in snow again, it'll be too soon. Um, yeah, exactly. As compared to my friend Mr. Newman here, who I think lives for the snow. This guy lives in Denver, and you're like disappointed with the amount of snow you get there, right?
Right, right. I wish we had about 150 inches a year.
How did you guys do this winter for snow?
We're ahead of average. It's pretty great.
Yeah, okay. Because I know the East Coast is like Carlos. You guys haven't gotten anything at all, really, have you?
No,
Uh,
not really. And I mentioned to Mr. Newman there. I was and you're gonna say from a New Yorker going to a Colorado guy saying, that's a typical New York thing. But I was out visiting that neck of the woods, and you're gonna say, what neck of the woods? Well, it was my buddy who lived in Parker, Colorado.
yeah, yeah. I'm right next to Parker. I'm actually in Aurora.
You see,
Eagle
I wasn't
River.
so
Small world, right?
yeah, I was like that. And so I would say to my friend, he's a hardcore New Yorker, and he's out there all of a sudden. I think he left New York so he didn't have to shovel. But he's
Yeah.
in Parker, Colorado, and he's enjoying the life out there. So kudos to you. It's beautiful
Yeah, well,
country, I might add.
it is beautiful, but the older I get, the less I feel like shoveling. Right now, I choose to be out there with a snowblower. You guys
Yeah.
have motorcycles. I
Yeah.
have a snowblower
Yeah.
for that same. I can't speak for you guys because I'm not into
Gas powered
motorcycles,
toys, man.
but the smell, the noise, the
Yeah.
vibration, I
Yeah.
enjoy it. It reminds me of a different time in my life that I really enjoyed.
It's
At some
Scott,
primal.
point, at
Scott,
some
let's
point, I'm
do
going
it
to say
this
fuck
way.
this, but
Scott, why don't you just put a little seat on that power?
Yeah. Yeah. Believe me, if it
And
were
just
possible.
uh,
we'll cut you that slack.
yeah, you know what? My ass vibrating would be a great thing. If I could figure out how to add that to the snowblowing experience, I would do it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think that the part of what led me into wanting to ride a motorcycle was the fact that I knew very little about, other than in common sense stuff about how a combustion engine really works and like how a small kind of, a smallish, we'll say engine works. And if I were ever in a situation where I needed to be able to take one apart or put one back together or troubleshoot something, and this wasn't like, what happens if the grid goes down? Am I going to be able to fend for myself? But it was kind of like, you get to this point in life and it's like, I don't know how to do shit, like I can't, like, and it just feels like you feel a little vulnerable. But, and that's, part of the reason why a snowblower is cool too, because it's that same gas powered fascination.
You know,
When I Jay, do you remember when my bedroom was downstairs
Yes.
in my house on Estelle Drive?
Yeah. They call that
It
the
was
basement.
yeah.
Oh, it was this raised ranch though. It was a split level.
Yeah. And my dad would start the snowblower in the garage, so the whole downstairs of the house would smell like exhaust. And at the time, it wasn't pleasant. Now it invokes happy memories of childhood.
Yeah.
And I know it's stupid. I'm not into motorcycles, but I love that you guys are.
Yeah.
I'm just here
You
to
know,
enjoy your love of motorcycles.
So I'm gonna turn this episode around on you, Jay. All
Okay.
right. Because we have here. I've been riding for over 40 some odd years, give or take a year or two here. And I and now Jay, you've been riding now
About 3 years.
with how many?
3 years.
3 years. Okay. And Scott, you have never been on a motorcycle.
I've been on a motorcycle. I have never driven one.
Okay.
As the I've been a passenger. How about that?
Okay. Fair enough. Fair enough. And in that,
Unless you count video games.
Now, and now
Oh
we
gosh,
have.
on
So we
GTA,
have.
Grand Theft Auto, I am an expert motorcycle rider.
Yeah, Carlos, I had to clarify that. We're not counting video games. So actual motorcycle riding is not much.
So I'm tempted because here we have, Scott, you have the luxury or the bad misfortune of being a passenger, which could be a good or a very bad experience, which
Right.
could then make you realize I'll never get on a motorcycle again because the rider that you had, maybe not, or the size of the bike or the conditions, kind of said, I'd rather, beat the crap out of my snowblower than to be a passenger on the back of a ride.
Yeah.
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 Okay.
That's
Absolutely. And I saw friends of mine and friends of my dad get hurt
yes.
as motorcycle drivers who were hit by people who were not paying attention to motorcycles on the road. And how much they were at fault for that, I have no idea. But it's
Sure.
kind of like skiing. I don't know. I saw a lot of people bust their knees up skiing. It just doesn't interest me.
Yeah, and I think that's that's actually and part of so today's episode, what we're going to talk about, buying your first bike, a big part of this conversation, and just it doesn't it assumes that you've made the decision to buy a bike and you want to learn to ride, or whatever the case may be. And for the most part, we're probably talking about people who are first time or new riders that want to buy a bike. But a big part of just getting to that decision, especially, and I'm going to probably skewing towards folks who are maybe have a few more decades under their belt and a greater sense of fear, is like, is this something I should be doing? Can I get hurt? People that have been hurt, and immediately riding a motorcycle is going to be more dangerous than being in a car, for example. So being visible, for example, being seen, all of these things are things that you need to think about when you buy a motorcycle that you might not think about initially if you're a first time rider.
Okay.
Yeah.
Take it back. Take a step back.
Take it back.
When you think of yourself,
Yes.
you're a very cautious guy.
Yes.
You're a very, safety. You want to make sure everything is right and its place.
I'm a
right?
bit of a worrywart.
Okay, that's fine. What before you even bought that first bike
Mm-hmm.
prior to the Harley? What was going through your head, and how did you arrive? Because I know you didn't talk to me
Yeah.
about, Uncle C. We're gonna.
It's a really good question. It's a really good point.
What
Yeah.
prompted you, and how did you get to that decision of buying that bike?
So
this is probably good info for your show.
yeah.
If you'd rather answer this while we're actually recording something.
No, we're on. We're live, man.
Oh, okay. Well, then why didn't you tell me? Okay,
Yeah,
go
sorry
ahead.
about that. Yeah, well, that's that's the benefit of, and this is only episode 2, so we're learning as we go. It's a live stream with obviously available in perpetuity for replay, but until we build up a live audience, the nature of doing a live show where we actually have a start time and a formal launch is going to take a little bit of massaging, we'll say. So, I figure this is a lot like when you have a conversation at work or something like that. Like if it just starts to go and people start to get into it, I do a lot of facilitating. Usually just let's break into the discussion. So I think.
Sorry for interrupting there. Go back to what was going.
No, I'm glad you mentioned it, because I want to go back to the show notes. So this is we are kicking off episode 2, buying your first bike, and Carlos just asked what was going through my head, and I don't know if this is kind of part of what you were thinking of, but for the first part, I was an older guy, my early 40s when I first started to learn to ride, and part of approaching it, and this is just me. Lots of people are different. Probably to a fault. I worried a little bit about people thinking that I was crazy. So, there are certain people that are going to be like, yeah, that's awesome, go for it. But most people are going to tell you, no, you shouldn't do that, or about the person they know who got killed. Right, exactly. So I kind of kept it to myself until I got to the point where I knew I was going to actually, yeah. I kept it to myself until I got to the point where I knew I was going to take the California rider safety course to go towards getting my license and doing all that. But what led me, the way I approached it was because I had the presence of mind to first of all, want to be safe about it, but B, also know that, not to be crazy. I did things, I think, very thoroughly so that as soon as people were like, you're a nut, I could say, you know what, maybe, but here's what I did, and, this is what I'm doing. So does that answer the question?
It's sort of the thing about that I try to tell folks, because the type of, retrospect, you can look back now upon that first motorcycle. Looking back on it, what engine size was that?
That was, so this is, I started off, my first bike was a Suzuki GSXR 250. So the Gixxer, baby, little 250.
What kind of a bike is that? Because as we all know, there's different type of bikes. What would you describe that to Mr. Scott, who's never seen a motorcycle? How would you describe that to him as the type of motorcycle it is?
I would describe it as a sport bike. Or a crotch rocket, if I were being.
You know what a sport bike is?
Yeah, sure. In general terms, I have a picture in my mind of, I don't know, sleek fairings and
yes,
not a lot of exposed chrome, maybe more plastic,
right?
Matte colors. I don't know. That's about what I can picture.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a sport bike. It's the kind where, and I'll bring up a visual here for folks, all of our viewers. And I forgot to mention too, by the way, today's episode is sponsored by Throttle Addict. So check out Throttle Addict, save 15%, get yourself dressed up. We'll talk more about them in a bit. But yeah, a sport bike is the opposite of, like, if you look at our Old in the Way logo, that's a chopper actually, but a more cruiser style, like where you're leaned back. So, however, I will say, and this is a bit of just on my first bike, although it looked like a sport bike, part of the reason why I chose it is it actually has, to get very technical, it has upright controls, which mean although it looks like a sports bike, your feet are not back behind you. Your feet are directly underneath you on that bike, so you're sitting upright technically, which is actually one of the reasons why I got rid of it. But you do have the lean forward, like clip-on handlebars, but your feet are up and down. It's about 30-inch height off the ground. It's a 250cc engine, which is about as small as you're going to get for a road worthy motorcycle for an adult, we'll say. And it weighed about 400 pounds soaking wet, meaning with everything loaded down.
What did you compare it to? Did you look at other sport bikes?
Yeah.
In comparison?
Yeah, lots of them.
Bike versus a general purpose bike, or a touring bike, or a cruiser?
Well, I think, that's a good question. And I think what I looked at first was, you have kind of in your mind romantically what you want for a motorcycle. And if I could draw it, it would be what you see in the logo there for Old in the Way. And that was kind of, when I struck out down this path. I looked at, and I am, for people who are watching the show, I'm a voracious kind of reader. When I get into a topic, I want to consume as much as I can. And what I ultimately did, the reason I looked at every kind of bike, why I landed on what I landed, and I want to hear what you think about this. And I already know, spoiler alert for our viewers, I know what you think about this, Carlos, because I read your notes, but I chose what I chose because of the weight of the bike, the size, and the size of the engine. Those were ultimately the two, and not getting into cost, and we can talk about all that stuff, but for me, it was the weight of the bike and the size of the engine being something that I could learn on. And as it turns out, what I found in that class was really, that's what it was, the best choice, we'll say. So let me stop there. Weight and size of engine.
Let me interject, Jay.
Please.
I want you to answer this question honestly.
Yes.
How much of it was that to a novice rider, a sport bike looks cooler? And
Uh,
don't be offended by that. It's more of, oh, well, these are like old guy bikes versus, oh, this is like the super fast, Ninja crotch rocket 2000.
Yeah, there's actually was a little element of that, and I will be honest, this is going to die me out. There was a part of me, so as somebody who's in a technology nerd and who appreciates elegance and function and things of that nature and devices, there was a part of me that did not want to drive something that looked like a discarded barbecue. So, so that having been said, I actually looked at, and there's like a between sport bikes and we'll say.
I have to interrupt you. Remind me to tell you why I went from a Honda to a Harley. Keep that in the back, pin that, and I'll explain that later. Go ahead.
I will, but also part of it is just one last point, Scott, on your question. Part of it was because I also didn't want to be. I kind of felt like if I bought something like there was, picture like one of those XY access things, like the cooler looking a bike I bought, I was thinking the more likely it was going to be that I was going to drop it and it was not going to be the right bike fit for me. So like I really forced myself to focus on the right function. And I know we're kind of, we're jumping around the topic a bit. And part of the reason why I think that this is such a, such a challenging topic is I think a lot of people, if you follow the right instruction, like the common wisdom on what kind of bike to buy, chances are 6 months after you buy your first bike, there's a good chance you're going to have outgrown it if you continue to ride and you like it. And that's, pretty much what happened to me. And I think that's what happens to a lot of new riders. And it's probably why people end up buying in over their head at first. So I don't know, Carlos, what do you think about that?
Yeah, no, you're right on that. I was just trying to think of that. Again, my mantra is always going to be, you never buy new, you always buy used. The first one, because the reality is you're going to drop that motorcycle, you're going to scratch it, and it's easier to deal with a ride that you didn't spend a heck of a lot, but you got a ton of experience. And in that sense, that way, I mean, my first ride wasn't looking good, wasn't looking functionality. It was like I said, I want to get a motorcycle. I just want to ride a motorcycle. My first one was a 1970 Honda 450, beat up, dinged up, but I was proud of that dinging. And it didn't. It was the most boring looking horizontal bike, cold, shook and rattled everything, but I didn't care.
Right.
And that really was. It wasn't. I didn't. I had no concept of weight. I had no concept of style, of whether the difference between sport, cruiser, touring didn't matter. It was. I think it was presented to me saying, "So you want to ride a bike? Hey, my buddy's got a bike."
Yeah, well, let me ask you. Let me interrupt you for a second. Back then, I was going to make a. Back then, before fire, they must have. This was just recently after they invented the wheel, and the first motorcycles were. Was it a big like? I feel like there's a were the classes and the cultures of different riding styles, because Scott, something that's, I don't know how much you're aware of this, but for your benefit, like each of the different kinds of bike styles we're talking about, cruisers and sports bikes and, Gull Wings and Hondas or Gold Wings or whatever. How prevalent was it back then that the rider culture was really, big, or was it still kind of developing?
No, it wasn't as pronounced. It wasn't as segmented.
You didn't have like groups of
is.
people who are like evangelical about the types of bike they ride and
You
stuff.
know what? The reality, there was no commingling. It was the Honda people stuck with the Honda.
Okay.
People, they were nice people. They didn't curse. They didn't get drunk and hang around bars and people. They were really nice people. They were associated. They went up to Lake George and they went on nice little trips around the lake. And of course the Harley people.
I have my AMA magazine here.
and the Harley people were the raucous guys because all they saw was born losers,
Yeah.
everybody wanted to be the Marlon Brando, the wild one,
Yeah.
they want to be. I mean, how many times you hear it? Hey, Johnny, what are you rebelling against? What do you got?
The leftover Easy Rider culture
Yeah,
is in my
it,
mind.
it, and
Yeah, exactly.
but when you saw like that Easy Rider, I think Peter Fonda and Dennis Hopper really brought around such a oh man, you can be badass and still look cool. You were and everybody wanted to get a Captain America bike,
Yeah. Yeah.
and get that, and that really got it going. But back then, I don't even think I was influenced by any of that. It was just, I think, circumstances. I knew I wanted to ride because I liked the concept of riding with no other attitude except, and then, how I ended up with a 450cc engine that was rattly, cold. I look at the pictures of it and it's about as boring as you can get. And that was my first kick around bike that got me going. Now, if I was going to give advice to people, it would be so much more detailed. If you were talking to me prior to buying, I'd say, well, Jay, where are you going to go with that? What are you going to do with that, Jay?
Yeah. Yeah.
How far are you going to go? And I'm going to give you a segue where a boss of mine, senior vice.
Oh, is this the guy who bought the we talked
Yeah.
about? Yeah, the what did he buy though? What was the bike that he bought?
A 750 Kawasaki Vulcan.
Big
Okay.
bike.
Now, you're talking about a guy who didn't know how to ride, never took any lessons, never saw it. All he heard was when I worked for him, all the stories of me riding. And he says to me, let's go you want to take me to a motorcycle show? Hey, when you have somebody like that, especially your boss who wants to go on most, hey, excellent. And it was on the day doing work. He said, you can have the day off. How cool is that?
My kind
We
of
go to
boss.
the show. I show him around. There's Hondas, there's Harleys, there's Yamahas, Kawasaki. So I figured, all right.
Where was the
Go
show?
around, sit on all of them, and we'll talk at the end of the show. A couple hours later, he looks at me and he says, I did it. Did what? I bought a bike. But you don't know how to ride. It's okay. I bought lessons. Oh, I bought the leathers. I bought the chaps. I bought everything that I need to go. But you've never been on a bike. That's okay. And without my guidance, except that he just liked the cruiser look of the bike, a leather jacket with an American flag on the back of it, and off he went to learn how to ride it. That was definitely something that I was not called for. That lasted for a couple of months before he went off the road and
Yeah.
broke his shoulder and his arm and sold the bike, and he gave me the leather jacket.
Yeah, that's. I was gonna say, who got his stuff? Who bought the part, the usable parts? Yeah, that.
Jay, would you say there's also a cohort of people who want? This is a leading question, but they want to belong to a group. So just take, for instance, somebody like me who's not really that interested in motorcycles, but man, look at all this great stuff. I can buy a motorcycle, I can buy hats and leather and boots and
gear.
all this great stuff. Gear, exactly. And then all of a sudden, once you've bought all that and
now what?
It's worn off.
Yeah.
Oh crap, I don't really enjoy this all that much. And I've been part of this with other purchases. I don't know exactly what it is off the top of my head.
To answer Scott's question, I've had 11 motorcycles in my career, and the first I'm gonna say the first 5 were Hondas, and I realized my last Honda, I was trying to make it look like a Harley. Now, at that time, customization, aftermarket parts was a rarity. It was the Harley guy was such an individualist that he made his own stuff. He created his own stuff.
Right.
He drilled. He was in his garage tooling, chroming. He was doing whatever, and he had friends who knew friends, and everybody like pulled together their hammers and everything. And I remember a guy who worked on this stuff, and he said, and I asked him, "Can you do this for my Honda?" He says, "You really should get a Harley." I said, yeah, but can you do this on my? And I actually made a sticker called Honda Davidson. Yeah,
That's funny.
and once I realized that, I said, you know what? What am I doing?
Yeah.
Let me just
Jay,
let
that's
me
like our
just sell it. And when I sold that bike, this guy gave me exactly the money I wanted. He says, I got this is a beautiful Harley. And I kept on reminding him, no, it's a Honda. It's a Honda Shadow Ace 1100. No, no, no. Dude, this is like a Harley, man. This is a Harley. So,
They're
so
highly
the
highly sought
customizations,
after bikes.
you know what? I did find that the Harley mindset allowed you to individualize, customize this piece of equipment to your heart's content, while the others were more content. The other manufacturers were more content. Well, this is what it came out. This is what it is, and have a nice day. So
The Scott, the perfect analogy is an Apple or a Mac system versus a Windows system. The Honda is meant to be a closed system that you buy and it's covered in a fairing and it does everything you need to do without you taking it apart. Whereas, the Harley is meant to rattle the day it comes off off the assembly line and to be tinkered with. And I think, as far as when we think about buying, so for somebody listening to this and watching this show, buying your first bike, let's a couple of things to recap so far. There's going to probably be a bunch of different, there could be a number of different reasons why you might be deciding to take up riding a motorcycle. And if it's because you just want to ride and you're not sure why, but you want to ride, then you're going to follow the same path, but you have to take a look at the different characteristics of the size and the weight. What's going to be the right size fit bike for you? If you're somebody who wants to learn to ride because you just binged Sons of Anarchy, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't still go down this path, but you should at least have this presence of mind to know that if you're attracted to something because of the way it looks or because of the culture or because you can buy a bunch of gear, those are superficial reasons, but they're not necessarily, they don't have to be bad reasons. I'm not judging that, but know that you have to understand at least the different types of bikes. And I say that from experience in that I was somebody, who in my mind, if I had to, buy a bike right away and I had one choice and you pressured me, I would have said, well, give me a bike that looks like this chopper. And who knows if it would have worked out at first, but I think the right bike for me was something else, and I learned enough to know that, and I'm glad that I did. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but still, I try to remind folks to say, okay, like you just said, what do you want it for?
Right.
And how far you're going to go. You try to tell people, are you just going to go from your house to the store and back? Well, and it's more of an education process to say, okay, how does it feel?
Yeah. What is your purpose?
Yeah, how does it feel to you? Like saying, okay, I like sitting on this. Oh, this feels awesome. Oh, I got to lean forward on this. I'm not so comfortable. I feel naked. Oh, I like having a big windshield. Oh, no windshield. I like a big ass seat there. Oh no, I can't have a big ass seat. And so you define. Then you say, well, now you finally said that bike looks cool. That looks right. Oh, it's $10,000. Oh man, I only got $1,000. Oh, well, let's go back to that drawing board.
Kawasaki, used Kawasaki Ninja, heavily scraped.
And I would tell people, and one of the things that drives me even to this day, I as part of the Harley chapter, as their
that's Harley's Harley Owners Group, HOG for
Harley Owners Group in New York. I was the director and safety officer, and I remember I would take first time seasoned veterans and I bring them out to an airplane field. And I bring them out to an airplane field. So, okay, this is where you can mess up. This is where you can try.
And then we would take them to another country and rendition them.
Yes, I basically then I put cones out on the field, and then as what you were saying. Now, what happens if I would see these guys, and Mike, I would cringe to see if I see you sitting on a motorcycle, and you're on your tiptoes. There's something wrong with this picture.
Yeah,
there's something because stability, safety is of the utmost concern. So if you're already on your tiptoes, then that's a good start. Then you realize I would sometimes give a little tip to somebody. Said, go into a showroom, sit on a bike. All right, now your feet are flat. Okay, so far so good. Now, Mr. Scott will sit on that bike and his feet are flat and he's feeling pretty good. He's handled snow blowers before, so this is no.
I'm seasoned. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, you're seasoned. Now I'm going to make Scott stand up. Now he's going to stand up. He's still sitting on the bike, but he's really going to stand over the bike.
Right.
And what's going to hold up the bike is his thighs. You got that, Scott? Your left thigh, your right thigh are holding up this
creamy white thighs.
Yeah, I am standing picturing this right now.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, this is a good exercise because this is keep going. I think I know where you're going. Go ahead.
Yeah, so now you're straddling this hunk of machinery there, and I'm going to tell you then.
Swing your hips a little.
You're going to take your hands off there, and now you're going to start moving your thighs from side to side. Can you move that engine a couple of inches to the left and a couple of inches to the right without it suddenly say, holy crap, this is going to really knock me over?
If well, let me ask you a dumb question. Let me interrupt you for 1 second.
Yeah.
What about somebody's height? Now, I'm 6'3". Jay, I don't remember what you are, but probably about 5'10".
5'10",
okay.
Yeah.
So do you buy a bike based on with what you're talking about?
Yes.
Here? For
it matters.
To have my feet flat on the ground, Jay is going to be on his tiptoes. Now, I don't know how motorcycles are adjusted or if you just buy something based on your height.
Seat and height. Seat has a lot to do with it because the seat could be very wide. Yeah, not to say that you got a big butt.
Right, it's going to spread you out a little bit.
A narrow profile seat is going to give your legs a little closer. But if you're, and now that's all well and good. Now, some areas of some bikes, they are a higher level of clearance. What some guys do is, even though the stock clearance is about this high, they want to lower it.
Right.
I knew a gentleman there, he was about 5'3", and everybody else that was, I'm going to just say this loosely, they were 5'6", 5'7", they were 7. He had the same bike.
Yeah.
And of course, he struggled with it because you got all this top heavy weight. He couldn't balance it, and he fell down a couple of times. So what did he do? He lowered it.
Yeah, and you're hitting on one of the most, just to key on this for a second for people watching, the seat height. If I had to pick one of three things in addition to the size of the engine, the weight of the overall bike, and I'd probably say even before that, and first would be the seat height. I think this is probably one of the single most important things, especially if you've never ridden before and you don't know a 30-inch seat from a 25-inch seat. For me, at 5'10", anything over 30 inches, think about your jeans, right? Your inseam. Anything over 30 inches for me, it starts to be, I'm up on my tippy toes. And the minute you get on your tippy toes, to what Carlos is saying, the weight of that bike and how it moves in the center of gravity gets tippy to use it. Now, at 25 inches...
on one bike.
For most people, for a new rider, you can't.
On a bicycle, you could change the seat height. But
I'm
assuming that's not a thing on a motorcycle. Could you change the wheel? Could you have a small
No,
wheel?
I would say for a new rider, get it out of your head that you're going to adjust the seat. Maybe you have a bike that has some suspension, but you're not going to chop it or anything like that. Right, yeah.
Good to know.
So you're going to end up... You need to know what the height of that seat is before you buy the bike. You got to look that up. And I would say, if you're 6 foot tall, probably a 30-inch seat is, probably perfect. I had a 30-inch seat on my sport bike, and I was fine. Although I have a 25 or 26 on my cruiser, my Harley, which is meant to be, as Carlos was saying, the style is low rider, so it's going to sit lower to the ground. But in addition to when we're talking about the seat height, for example, and the different types of bikes, there are usually the seat height is tied to the type of bike. So you're going to have cruisers are going to be between 25 and 30 inches. Sport bikes are going to be in the 30 to 30.
Let me stop you there.
Yeah,
Jay.
go ahead.
Scott and I would preface this to every new rider. Forget about the numbers. Mm-hmm. Forget about numbers. You're not going to remember a squat about a number. Right. Forget about 26, 31. It doesn't matter. Doesn't matter crap. Because what that machine between your legs feels like is going to dictate how it is. aftermarket, you can customize to your heart's content.
You're channeling Gene Hackman right now, Carlos. Do you know that from Hoosiers? You know that part before the big game? He's like, forget about the numbers, the crowds, their uniforms, the fancy, that bike. The minute that thing hits. Go ahead. Sorry.
There are some bikes that just wouldn't be a good fit for my height.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that's, Jay, I got a family member, Mike Considine.
Yeah, huge.
Okay.
Big guy.
He's a big guy. Really big, really tall. He's about 6'3".
It's gotta be,
something.
I'd say 6'5", probably,
6'5", He has a bike I sat on, and gas tank is humongous. And I felt like, holy moly, this is like for a bomber. I mean, this is like really big. And it was weird sitting on that, but I felt comfortable. My feet were flat. I stood above it. I moved it around. I said, I think it's 1100 cc engine. And I asked him, I said, hey, Mike, isn't this bike a little bit too small for you? And he commented, yeah, my 6'5", I can't get it. So he definitely had to adjust foot pegs, a different posture. He had to put everything, the seat, he had to adjust it. But going back to all that, that's all well and good if you got miles underneath.
Right. You're not going to know until you've ridden for a while what that feels, what you want to feel like.
It's like if one of the things about like these shows is a great opportunity. Forget about the prices. Forget about every guy's going to be a used car salesman trying to sell you everything. Right. And, forget about the babes dancing up there and all that crap. You actually got to sit on it. Test, and I say test ride. You sit on it, and if you feel good after you sit on from Harleys to Kawasaki to Yamahas, and you try sitting on different styles, then you're going to come out of there, this was comfortable. Now, once your butt is comfortable, now you can start jazzing it up. Do I want to be comfortable forward, leaning over? Do I want to lean back? I had a guy, our chapter would ride on a Sunday, and there would be anywhere from 5 to 15 people riding to go a couple hours, whatever. And we usually encourage people, if you want to bring a friend, go ahead. And of course, one guy brought a crotch rocket buddy who was like pretty confident, saying, yeah, I can hit those turns, I can do this, I can do that. Well, he was already crying when we got to the first rest stop, because while his bike could outperform all of us old farts, and he could do 0 to 60 in nanoseconds, we got up there with a smile to the first rest stop, and the poor guy was crying because he was in a crouched over posture.
Yeah.
So that goes to show you, yes, had he been street racing, it would have kicked our butt, then that would have been no issue. But again, knowing that maybe that kind of riding, and that's what people have to realize.
You're making it. This is another great reminder for people watching the show is not all, like, again, if you're new to riding and you're trying to figure out, you want to go down this path, this is the stuff. A lot of this is like, I think would fall into the category, especially what Scott, kind of what you were asking, and Carlos, what you've been answering is things that you want to know but might be afraid to ask. And not all bikes are equal, right? They not only look different because of style and culture, they also look different because of function, because they're made to do different things. And one of the, Scott, from an engineering standpoint, something you can think about is bikes with a higher clearance, taller, or that are going to have a higher seat, are generally made to are for different kinds of riding, typically off-road or areas where you're going to need a greater level of clearance, or potentially turning level, like you don't want to bottom out, etc. But the primary factor is going to be height. But for somebody who's new, not all bikes are equal, and the different riding styles, that from a sitting upright to leaning forward to sitting back in a cruiser, and also the different types of bikes from a sport bike, or a Japanese bike engine that's wrapped in a fairing versus a big V twin engine that's open and sitting between your legs. It's a very different rider experience. So know that, seat height is important. We talked about engine size. We talked about weight. know that not all of these bikes are going to be considered equal. I want to say, talking about why you get a bike, Carlos, this was a big reason in looking through some of your show notes and what we talked about before. Knowing what you're going to do with the bike should be a major factor. I work from home. I don't have to commute anywhere. So I was able to buy a bike because I wanted to explore. My path was I wanted to go out and explore Southern California. I followed conventional logic, and I want to tell you guys this is what I was told. So here, for anybody listening, you can write this down. This was what I culled from months of reading and stuff and talking to people before I bought my first bike. Excuse me.
Prior to this, you didn't have, any other friends or associate that you picked their head aside from me?
No, not really. You guys, and there was a guy. If he's out there, Aaron, one of my neighbors and buddies who lived here in Imperial Beach. He's been now currently stationed in Jacksonville, but he was a Harley rider. His wife and we were all good friends, and so I talked to him a little bit. But again, we talked about this in episode 1. Didn't have any really close friends. Didn't have anybody with a garage I could go sit on bikes. I had no access, so I had to kind of read into this. And what people told me, the sum of all the knowledge I obtained was buy a lightweight bike with a low-powered engine and learn to ride that for 2 years. All the gear, all the time, that kind of stuff. But buy a lightweight bike, learn to ride it, and then after that, you'll know what you like, and by that time you can. Those same people will also tell you, you'll probably want to buy something different at 6 months. That's up to you. And in addition to how to buy it, like from a dealership or privately, and we can talk about that stuff. But lightweight bike, low power, and learn to ride it for a couple of years, which is what I did. And I want to share that because that's, I think, a good approach for people. But there's also a flip side to it, which is about what I found is that a lightweight bike that you sit upright in a very kind of institutional form in, that feels like you're kind of, my bike the Suzuki had some noise. It was a Gixxer, felt good, but it was very institutional. And I got to a point where it was like, this kind of riding is not like inspiring me I don't want to go do more of this, right? It was just felt very plain. And I'll take a breath in a minute here. When I test drove my Harley, it was like a completely different riding experience. And you could probably imagine what I mean by that, but that's, definitely, good. It's good to follow the advice about what kind of a bike to buy, but you may find yourself like, it may not be the style of riding that you ultimately want to do.
Which leads me, that was perfect in the sense of that you went through the program. How many miles would you say you did on that before you sold it? How many did you think you put on it?
Oh, I know actually. I think it was probably 4, maybe. I probably put maybe 4,000 on it.
Okay, so you put some
under. It was more
it.
than 3 and less than 6, I think.
All right, you put in a New York environment. That's about a season's worth of riding there.
Yeah.
So you did good with that. So
yeah, and I liked it. It was a great bike, and it's, if it handled very well. I couldn't, it exactly. And if I was going to be commuting, right, if I was going to be riding, 20, 30 miles back and forth to work each day or something like that, it would have been, perfect for that, utilitarian. It was really cheap. It's an inexpensive, and I bought mine. I know this goes against the this goes against the conventional wisdom. I bought my first bike new because, a worrywart, and I wanted to buy it from a dealership where if I could go back to them and that kind of thing. I didn't want my first bike to be a mechanical thing I had to worry about. I figured I'd get to that down the line. So that's why. But it was really utility, but it was just, after a while it just felt like you're just sitting up. You're just
You did fine on that, because I'm gonna keep on going back to Scott, because I'm gonna use Scott some more.
Yes, do that. Yes.
In that.
Have your
Scott,
way with him.
Do you have other motorcycle buddies?
No, you know what? I was thinking about a buddy of mine though, who was a first-time motorcycle buyer who was very outside what you guys are talking about here. Jay, he lives in San Jose.
Yep.
And he has a 2-mile commute to work.
Okay.
And they had a 1-car garage, and he said, I think when he wasn't working, when he was working remotely, the car was mostly just sitting there. He has a wife and kids, but he said, this makes a lot of sense for me to just get a small motorcycle, ride 2 miles to work. The gas mileage is better. It's easier to store. He wasn't buying it for any other reason than the pure utility.
Function.
Does that
Yeah.
make sense?
Yeah,
Function.
totally.
And I think he bought it. I think he had an opportunity for a private sale and it was really cheap. I have no idea if it was the right size for him, which makes me think about another kind of buyer who would say, hey, I've got this opportunity for a really great deal on a bike. Well, after what you guys are saying, I hope it's the right size for you, because if not, you're trying to fit a round peg into a square hole.
Yeah.
And you know
Yeah.
what? Sometimes it because the opportunity presents itself, then you say, and the price is right.
Yeah.
Then I mean, it happened with me and Jay. I don't know if you know this story. As I said, I had 5 Hondas. Now my last one, I was making it into Honda Davidson. I made a little sticker for it that was pretty cool, and I had wanted to buy a Harley, and back then, the Harley demand was so strict. You got a number. Now, us old farts remember that crap, but imagine going into a dealership that
And you had to wait.
Limited inventory. You got a number, and there were guys buying numbers. So if you were like number 20, the guy had selling you number 20, and you were like 450. You wanted to buy that, and the guy would like say, "Okay, I'll swap with you," and etc. And I remember, Jay, I went into the present dealership that I'm still affiliated with, and I remember
which is where, just for geography's sake, what dealership do you go to?
This is a Harley Davidson of New York City, in Long Island City, New York.
Right on.
Today's episode brought to you by Harley of New York City.
And the folks over there, I remember, Jay, yes, my first bike, I was going to buy that 883 Sportster.
Ah.
Okay, there it was on the floor.
The Honda Civic of Harleys, Scott, for reference.
the beige Camry?
Yes,
exactly. The beige Camry.
Yep.
I went in there, Jay, and I said to them, I want this bike. And the guy says, no, that bike is assigned to somebody. I said, did he pay you? and he said, no. I said, I'll pay you right now. I'll pay you cash right now.
Wow.
The guy said, I can't do it. I said, I got $10,000 here in this bag. I can give it to you. No. He would not budge.
Wouldn't take your money.
Huh?
Wouldn't take your money.
Wouldn't take my money. I was so angry about it. I went back, and it happened to be that a friend that worked with me and another company said, hey, Carlos, this guy, he left his Harley in my garage and he owes me money.
Oh, there you go.
Well, it could have been that you were standing there with a sack full of $10,000 too. You probably
well, she didn't know that.
Outside of it.
Yeah.
But Jay, that was how I got my first Harley. It was a 1994 Harley Dyna Wide Glide.
Oh, I know the bike. Is that the blue? Was it the blue one? Yeah.
1340 cc engine on that, and I saw this thing lying.
What year was it?
Garage,
that sounds
and
big.
I had absolutely no knowledge about Harleys, except that they always told me the Harley will always mark its spot. It's like a dog. It's like it got to an area that always left an oil spill. And I said, okay, I could live with that.
Scott, you had a you mentioned that about like the timing of I want to, before we get away from it, point out that when I bought my first bike, so as I was in the process of buying it, I mentioned our friends that my buddy Aaron, who's a rider, he had just upgraded to I forget I think he had a Sportster and he upgraded, or maybe a Street Glide, and he upgraded to nice bagger with the speakers and everything outside, down by the feet, loaded. And they were at the same time they were being relocated from here in Imperial Beach to Jacksonville. So he was trying to sell his old bike, and I'm sure we were good friends. I'm sure it was like the perfect opportunity to buy a bike from somebody I knew him, I trust him, he knew. But I was, this is me sounding virtuous and back patting, but I was so entrenched in, I have to get a bike that's going to be the right fit for me, because I am not going to be a jackass who buys a Harley that he can't handle out of the gate and, is stupid. I'll get there, eventually. And I wasn't sure yet, even at that time, and this is important, going back to the discarded barbecue comment from earlier, I didn't know yet what my style of riding was going to be. I had seen myself probably moving from where, a sport bike ultimately to, some kind of a touring bike, but not necessarily a Harley. And I can talk about why I fell in love with my Harley, but I would say advice, and Carlos, curious to know, of course, what you think. If I can, this is, due to Vib's only opinion here, but if you are buying a new bike, another thing to take away, we talked about size, engine size, weight, seat height, different styles of bike. Don't judge a book by its cover. Generally speaking, yeah, exactly. Unless you know for a fact that you're going to do one of these activities, or, well, I wouldn't even say that. If you're a new rider, do not buy an adventure bike, a chopper, or a a high-powered sports bike or race bike. Adventure bikes are higher clearance. You see these. They're one way to tell a new rider or somebody's got, like, for example, if you don't know what I'm talking about, those are the bikes with, like, they look like they have Samsonite luggage strapped all over them. They're
right.
These are, your
go across the Sahara Desert.
Right. They're meant to be multi-purpose. You can ride them on and off road, and they're extremely popular right now. And they're really cool bikes, but they have really high ground clearance. And unless you're really tall, and understand and can manage that weight, I would not recommend that. Choppers are, everybody knows what a chopper looks like, and you can think of the big long bicycle wheel out in front with the long forks. Choppers are cool as hell. I really was interested in that kind of look. I am not now as much, other than, I like the chop seat look, but I'm not interested in something that's got 12 feet of fork out in front of me, because I now know how insanely difficult it is to ride something like that.
They were also popular in the last decade because there were a lot of TV shows about them.
There was this time, and I'll say this, so this is, I don't know if this is true or not, very, very quick anecdote. I was in downtown San Diego, so in a city. In downtown San Diego, probably like Manhattan, there's lots of streets where there's potholes, and they're not really, it's a lot of bumpy terrain. And I was at an intersection, and I watched this dude go by me on a chopper. And this was like, it looked like he bought it off one of those shows, and he looked like he was dressed like Jake from State Farm. And he had a little like German size helmet on. And I watched this dude go by me through this intersection, and not only was it bumpy from the terrain, but also like the chopper just, it's a hard tail in the back, right? And that's something we're not getting quite into yet here. But this dude just ran through, and he looked scared to death and uncomfortable. And the story in my head was like, this is a guy who bought a bike because of what it looked like, and is now realizing that it's probably not super comfortable to ride, at least not for what he's doing.
Well, Jay,
go ahead, Scott. Go ahead, Scott.
Well, I was going to say, what about the stereotypical midlife crisis guy? Jay, you and I are both cruising toward 50 years old,
yes,
and we know the kind of person
with a gut bullet, yeah,
the disposable income to say, you know what, I feel like spending 35 grand on a Harley, and it's going to be my first bike. And or even older, where you buy his and hers Harleys, and you put them on the back of your 40-foot trailer,
yes,
of your RV that you're
the
driving
Shasta,
because now it looks really cool, and you look like you
potato.
And honestly,
which brings us to mind,
you're signaling that you have a lot of money too.
Yeah.
Well, think about. I sometimes point to that movie, The Wild Hogs.
Yes, that's who you're describing to a T. That's the Wild Hog rider.
I never saw it, but I obviously take your word, both of your words on it.
Wild Hogs is exactly for guys who are trying to figure themselves out. Each has got crisis in their lives, and suddenly they realize that buying a motorcycle might be that avenue to escape, avenue to freedom, avenue that you know, it takes us all
There's
years
a
to.
retail therapy about it too. Like, my life's not going great, or I'm not satisfied with my life. Maybe I'll spend my way out of this, and it'll give me
Yeah.
something to think about for a while.
You know what? But the sad part about that, I've seen because Harley is an expensive commodity. Definitely, if you have disposable income and you feel, you'll notice most often than not, a newer, bigger Harley is owned by an older guy, you
Yes.
know,
Yeah.
and a younger person will have a slightly smaller, or he could have the same bike, but he's deeply in debt.
Well, true.
So I see it all on both ways, and sometimes I see these guys that physically cannot handle it and come
Yeah.
to a reality check that, here you are. I'm going to be 70 in September. I'm in good shape, but the reality is I know, what my limitations are, et cetera. And I wouldn't try to tell people to get, a heavy 900-pound bike on two wheels when you're like 5'3", and just because it looks cool, you
Yeah, and
got
you
the
weigh
money.
125 pounds. Like,
Yeah.
I just can't see you muscling that bike around.
Well,
You can you can easily buy out of your weight class for sure.
my a gentleman from the hog chapter, that passed away, but at the time he wanted to he really got into bikes or Harleys. He had a lot of disposal. He was a senior vice president of blah blah blah. He bought himself that first good, beautiful introductory cruiser, so he was sharp. He was a badass. He looked like, okay. And he said he wanted something then bigger. So he got the next bigger bike. And a big touring bike is a lot of weight. You're going from 600-700 pounds to about 900 pounds. That's an extra human being without the human being. Well, he started taking his granddaughter along with him for rides, which is, she was a little lady, and he dropped the bike with her in the parking lot, making a turn. So she was like a little ninja. She rolled off of it, and and he was like, okay, his pride, and everybody busted his chops about it and helped him pick it up, which is another thing. Don't buy a bike or learn the technique, because you got to assume nobody is going to help you pick that bike up.
Yeah.
No.
As somebody who's had to pick their bike up in the middle of an intersection, and that's I wasn't glad about the time I had the experience. I'm glad I got it out of my way, and I'm glad the turn around and stand out, pick it up, it worked. And as I was yelling at the person who freaking ran the red light, but that's another story for another episode. I think the big, you can, something when you guys are, one of the things I'm when we talk about this is there is like a, we've talked about buy the right size, and a lot of times buy the right seat height, and the bike that's the right fit for you to learn on may not be the bike that the romantically you see yourself on. And that's not to say that you shouldn't just buy that bike, or to Scott, to your point, like if you've got the money, can you go out and buy a $20,000-$30,000 bagger, if that's your Harley American dream, go for it if that's your thing. But just I would say be prepared, like have a tolerance for how much do you want to hurt, because you're going to drop this bike, you're going to you have to be able to do those things, and if you blow a ton of money on it, you're going to eat that.
there's a lot of and that's why I was asking you, Scott, because if you had motorcycle buddies, I think I know about probably 500 bicycle club dudes, and and Jay, the same thing with you. And I would probably start telling people, most often than not, if you got a buddy who knows a buddy who knows a buddy, they say, hey, I'm thinking of riding. I want to ride it. What do you think? Everybody's got opinions, like we know what. So the point is, then you start with that first guy, the guy who's going to try to sell you on that the BMW.
Right.
Oh man, BMWs is the best motorcycle. They are German made. These things are mechanical perfections. Yada 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 yada. And you sit on it, and you don't care about all the wonderful technologies built on it. Your ass hurts.
Right.
It doesn't feel right. You feel you're naked. Yes, it's a performance engine. It's a clockwork So then you just say, okay, that's cool. Then you go to the Japanese bike. You try to sit on those, and you finally start to realize, wow, so I can be comfortable, but I don't look cool. I want to look cool, but my ass, but and then okay, this is too high, this is too low, this is too big, this is too this. Oh, it's too noisy, it's too this, too that, and then you start when you finally, and because everybody's going to tell you, oh man, you got to buy this, or I know a dude who's selling this thing, he's got a great deal, and you're like, now you're starting, and then you're starting to learn, well, how much is how much?
Yeah.
How much am I paying for this? And now you're suddenly realizing you have no idea if they tell you that a Rolls Royce is 10 grand or they're telling you it's 100 grand. You know,
Yeah,
you don't know
reality is
until
a Harley Davidson is an expensive first bike for most people. You know, unless you're getting a sweetheart deal from somebody you know, or you know something that's severely however you're getting it. They're not cheap bikes, and there is when you wade into this conversation, this is part of the reason why I wanted to tackle this subject. There are no shortage of people who are going to tell you what to do and where to go,
Yes.
and and it's really you're going to be wading through a sea of opinions. And I think if you've got the money to blow, you've got the money to blow. Go for it. Buy whatever your style and your practical mind says. But you can definitely get a lot of bike and a great bike to learn on. I would say this: don't feel like you need to buy a Harley Davidson to learn.
Right. Definitely.
And the culture is not. The bike culture. There are people are really entrenched in their camps. It's one of the neat things about if you go look on Meetup, which is like a local for finding groups and stuff like that, not a Tinder kind of thing. If you go to like Meetup San Diego, there's a bike group for every type of bike you can imagine. There's probably, a woman's only version of each of those groups now, which goes to like how many women riders there are in the area. There's so many people in this area, and granted it's a
Latino
metro.
riders, Polish riders,
Yeah,
police riders.
every slice and dice you can imagine, there is a group, and they're populated and they're active, so like there's different so I would say try to talk to different people, get different exposure. I brought up just for a little bit of a visual aid here, and I don't know if you guys are following along on the Twitch feed, but I have when you're going to approach a dealership or a group, and I want to talk a little bit about that, like where you go as we kind of try to wrap this up and bring it home. Have here, this is the bar scene from Pee-wee's Big Adventure. This group, you guys might remember these guys. These may not be the group you want to approach at first if you don't know somebody there. This is Tommy Chong in his living room. He's probably got some good wisdom, definitely an old guy, but he may have a different view on riding. This is the Sons of Anarchy Clubhouse. Probably not the first place you want to go if you're going to pop in. Look, these guys are going to have a set of opinion.
With the Sons of Anarchy, I can't tell you how many that know me and said, Sensei, did you see Sons of Anarchy? No.
Yeah.
What do you mean? No. Why do I have to look at the fictionalized life of these guys that I'm never going to be running guns? I'm never going to be there shooting people and
right.
And there's so I don't want to see. Oh, you're amazing. I said. Then I would turn around. Do you ride? Do you ride? Just curious. Is that the stereotype that you're looking at? And then I did go back to it, and I did watch the whole season, whatever it was, the 1 or 2 seasons, and I saw the parallel of a cross section of the stereotype biker, Hell's Angel, savage nomads, type of mindset, which was like, you know what? I was more into looking at what kind of brides they had, than the philosophy behind it. Though I've met what was real about that show was they were a clone, in my opinion, of what the 2%ers, and that's a separate conversation.
Yeah.
Of a biker mentality that most people don't want to see or want to know or get involved with or anything. But
well, that's we're going to talk about this in a future episode. So put a pin in that for now, because the culture around the 1%er versus what all that's another topic that we're actually going to talk about. And Sons of Anarchy, I actually, as a side note, I started to watch it. Liz and I picked it up last year. We got through the first couple of seasons, and then, like, somehow they were in Ireland all of a sudden. They were writing, it was just like, it, no offense to the show, and it like kind of jumped the shark and got to be a little too soap opera-y for me. But we will talk about like that kind of culture in an upcoming episode, and what that how that impacts riding, and I have a feeling that culture, when we talk about buying a bike, again, it's bring us back to where you can go. I recommend, I recommend, if you want to get information, go to a dealership. If you've got a good bike shop in your area, like a private bike shop or like a motorsports place. I bought my first bike at a motorsports shop. I recommend going in and talking to people, sitting on the bikes, and like Carlos said, sitting on a bike in a showroom is fine, and being able to stand up and move that back and forth between your legs. Number one, you get a sense for the feel. You will also, I think, very quickly dispel or demystify, your feelings about how big is this thing and can I handle it? And you'll start to get a feeling of, what does the weight of a motorcycle feel like? A dealership's a great place to start. Last thing I'll say before Carlos, I'll let you jump in on this, is, any dealership you go to, these guys and gals are going to work on commission. So if you give people your phone number and you say you're looking, you're going to get, people are going to hound you. So, you can look online pretty much endlessly before you have to go in, if that's what you want to do.
From when I was looking at motorcycles over 40 years ago, the availability, obviously, in the internet didn't exist, in the sense that, you looked at an ad, you knew a buddy who knew a buddy, and you kind of like, and you always took that buddy with you. And that was the key to it. Now, so there you are, you got the wallet, and you got the subject matter expert. He may not even be a real expert, but he knows more than you.
Right.
And I remember when I was looking at bikes, and I brought a buddy along because I knew he rode. Not that he was super expert, but he went along and he pointed out, look, it's got some rust over here and it's got some scrape mark. Oh, wow, I didn't see that. I was too impressed with how clean it was. When he was looking at these cables look a little frayed. There's some scratch marks here. Oh, did you just change that tail light? So you want to talk to your buddies. You want to get everybody's opinion. And then if you do find somebody who says, I know somebody who knows somebody, and they recommend it like that, and they'll do solid by you, again, bring that buddy. And then, because then what your wallet, your credit card is going to, how much pain are you willing to pay? It's like, I'm sure that I don't know shit from Shinola about snowblowers, but I would probably be doing a lot of research first and say, what does $500 gets me? What does $1,000 get me? What the $2,000 gets me? Now, do I need a $2,000 super duper, John Deere, blah, blah, blah? Or can I get the bargain basement Home Depot, because I'm only going to do my sidewalk?
Right.
But are you going to outgrow it? And I think the best analogy I have is from my personal life is I'm an avid cook. I've had people say, hey, I really want to learn to cook. Can you recommend what I should get? If you just walk into Williams Sonoma and say, I want to learn to cook, they are very happy to sell you $2,000 worth of Calphalon pans and Wusthof knives and everything. But if you took me with you, I'd say, you know what? We just need one really good knife that's gonna, satisfy most of your needs. You can always buy more later. And we need one good pan and maybe some cutting boards. And that's probably all you need to find out if this is really what you want to get into. Jay, you're not as cheap as I am, but I have a weird quirk about me where when I spend too much money on something, let's say any hobby, I have a hard time letting the hobby fulfill the money that I spent. And what I mean by that is, let's say I went out and bought a $36,000 motorcycle. This is great. what if I don't enjoy it $36,000?
Yeah,
And
sunk
then every
cost.
time
Yeah,
I think about that, riding it, I think about how much money I spent and
yeah,
how it doesn't live up to what I hoped it would. And
yeah,
that's why I'm pretty cheap with things. I love what you guys were saying about buy a small bike that
yeah. Wade into it.
yeah, you expect to replace it after about a year, after you've learned what you like, what
Yeah,
you
you're gonna
don't
drop
like.
it. You're gonna bang it up.
You're
Yeah,
not replacing a Harley after the first year because you found out that wasn't your style
Well,
of bike
yeah, and you're probably
But-
still making payments on it.
for a long time. Yeah.
and talk about handling, and I leave you with this about as far as, and Jay, I talked to you about, because you mentioned something about somebody dropping it.
Yeah,
In the safety course that I gave, one of the things, it was requested by the women that rode motorcycles. So they're called the Ladies Harley Group. Now they're not somebody that they can drop slap you and kick your butt and wrestle you to the ground. They're all shapes, sizes, heights, etc., and all configurations of motorcycle. And they specifically asked me, Sensei, we would like you to teach us, give us a safety class, but no men are allowed. Now, it's not that they didn't want their husbands, their boyfriends, or their significant others to be there. Number one. And the only other man that was there was my trusty assistant, who was going to bring along stuff. And one of the things and the ages of the bikes were from brand new to quite a few years old. And I brought my friend, he brought a giant mat, a rubber mat. I put it on the ground.
like a gymnast
And I
mat
said,
kind of thing.
Huh?
Like a gymnastics mat.
Yeah, it could be a thick, heavy duty. And I would say, can I have your motorcycle? And they would say, well, sure, Sensei. And I rolled it over and I not dropped it, but I laid it down. And of course,
Yes, I know. I'm getting like, ah!
And I say, wait a minute. You're just in the street now. I didn't scratch it. It's on a rubber mat.
Yeah.
Now pick it up.
Yeah.
Well, pick it up. Well, I'm going to ask, no. You're in the middle of a street. You're on the side. There's no guide. There's no whole mess of people. Assume the worst. Pick it up.
You're on your own.
Yeah.
You're on your own. And
if you can't, then it's not the right motorcycle, right?
Right.
For that person?
It's not just that. It's learning the technique, because you have to assume that you will drop it. You will drop it, but there may not be those guys that are saying, oh, please, let me wave to them. No, you bought this $20,000, $25,000, 800-pound motorcycle. It's cool. You're a badass, and you're cruising around in it with your pigtails flying, but now you dropped it, and you got to pick it up. And
you're not so badass if you're standing there and you can't pick up your bike out of an intersection, right?
And every single one picked up their bike the proper way, single-handedly. And that was how everybody graduated.
Which, by the way, I have to. This is, they teach you that. So I also took a course similar, the California version of something similar to what Carlos is talking about. And the proper way, if your bike is down, is actually turn around with your back to it, and then like lift it up like that. So you're I guess deadlifting it or whatever, basically using your legs and not your upper body.
Definitely are locking it. You have to get in the mindset, using the proper physics, because the last thing you want to do is, I've fallen, I can't get up, as this thing is on top of you. So
yeah, look, it's and taking a course, we're going to wrap it up and bring this episode to a close, and we'll share the all of the tips that we've talked about in the show notes, obviously. They're, going and approaching learning how to ride, taking a class, if you can do it, is something I would highly recommend, because if nothing else, you can look at it this way. For a couple $100 and the cost of a helmet, a pair of gloves, and some shoes, you can take a 3-day class in wherever you live in the country, at least in the U.S., and you'll get some classroom instruction, but you'll also get road instruction, and you will go to a place more than likely that will have 10 or 15 or 20 motorcycles for you to choose from, and you can decide if, and they're going to be, like Carlos said, from probably relatively new to beat to shit. None of them are going to have turn signals or mirrors left on them anymore because they're going to have been dropped 1,000 times. But you'll get a chance to ride, a sport bike or size or a cruiser size and get a feeling. So it's worth it. And if you don't like doing it, and I will tell you, I went to a class and there was probably 20 people in my class. Most of them had been riding forever and were there simply to get, because they needed to. Yeah, and they needed to get their licenses, or they've been riding dirty or something like that, and insurance requires that you go and do it or something. So they were doing it, and there was a couple of young kids who were 17 whose parents, had just signed them in, and there was a couple other people who were just brand new riders like me, but mostly experienced riders. And there was one person who dropped the bike repeatedly, and at the end of the 3-day class, when you're graduating, they give you your certificate. That person was like, "I'm not gonna do this," and the instructors were like, "You shouldn't do this." And the person, it was kind of unfortunate for that person because they seemed kind of bummed, obviously, but they also only spent a few $100s to realize that this was not something that they wanted to do. So definitely think about taking a class.
If they quit after buying a bike, right?
Yeah, it's a great way. You don't need you don't need to have a license or have taken a class to buy your motorcycle. Right. So if you're thinking there's going to be some barrier of entry to you buying the wrong bike, there won't be. So nobody will stop you. I mentioned this in the last episode. You can buy a Suzuki Hayabusa or whatever that is like the fastest street legal bike or whatever for less than $20,000, and you can walk out of the dealership on the spot never having ridden a motorcycle, and they'll sell it to you. So, but don't buy out of your weight class. Keep in mind the size, keep in mind the weight, keep in mind the seat height. Keep in mind what you're going to be doing with the bike, and ask yourself, am I doing this because I want to learn to ride? Am I doing this because I want to, look or feel a certain way? And, at least be honest with yourself so you know that if you end up buying, an adventure bike with like a 40-inch seat clearance and you can't get your leg over it, then, you know what you're in for.
Jay, I'm on the Ducati site right now buying a bike.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
it's like
yeah.
$65,000. I think it's right for me.
Back tires like this. Back.
Hey, Scott, I'll leave you with this. We talked about bikes. We talked about and how usually the first bike, you kick it around for the first year or two. This woman in our chapter had her Sportster. You listen to this, Jay?
I love them.
Sportster was I think was one of the first Sportsters ever made.
Oh my gosh.
This thing was I think 30 years old, 20 years. I don't know what, but she was like the first one.
What kind of shape was it in?
Huh?
What kind of shape was it in?
Well, it was running.
Okay.
It was running. I mean, it wasn't.
Runs.
It wasn't,
period.
Wasn't,
good. Period.
it had a lot of good duct tape on it. It had a lot of, you could see what new shiny parts were bolted on it. But I looked at her and I said, "Carmen, why don't you get rid of that junker and treat yourself?" Now, you would have thought I just told this woman that she's a slut and that her father and her mother were.
Carmen, you ignorant slut.
And she looked at me, she said, "That Sportster has outlived 3 husbands, 4 jobs, and 5 moves, and it's going to be with me to the end." So for
keep the
those
Sportster.
who think that a motorcycle can last a long time, she was one of 2 people I ever met in my career that had a motorcycle longer than all their marriages.
It goes to show, right? Yeah. I definitely I think that the rat bike thing, if you and Scott, I'll send you some pictures, but rat bike building, which is a lot like rat car and other things where it's just beat up looking, is it's not. I don't know that I would have I'm too OCD to ride a rat bike. when it comes to like checking every little nook and cranny and cleaning everything constantly.
Is this thing going to literally vibrate itself apart as I'm
Yeah.
riding it?
Yeah, my last comment on riding a bike and the feeling of it is, I can't stress this enough, that there are people who are very passionate and evangelical about every kind of bike and maker and build, and Harley Davidson is obviously they set the mark, in that regard. And Harley's in a lot of ways, like Apple and they've become a brand that people are entranced with because of the brand. Yeah. Right, people covet, but there's a reason why, and it's not, and there is the sitting on my Suzuki felt like sitting on something that you knew it was on, but it was not, loud or anything, nor did it shake or vibrate. It was just sort of there. Sitting on a Harley on a 1200cc V-twin engine for the first time, having my hands out in front of me, and the first time I turned it on, at the time I described, it felt like I was sitting on something I shouldn't be sitting on. Like, this is too big and not like too big of a motorcycle. Like, this is not something a human should be sitting on. Like, I'm right on top of the engine. Everything is moving. And then, the rest is history. But it really does feel amazing. And that is part of the reason why, going to the store or just riding anywhere, it's incomprehensible, or you can't compare it to like being in a car, because every second and every inch of the ride feels great because you're in this kind of chaotic, and that's not everybody's thing. Some people like that BMW, that high performance, kind of quiet. They don't want to hear it and feel it. You'll find one out there. I like the loud, feeling like I'm sitting on top of a rocket and away you go.
Jay, I promise you that the Honda to the Harley was when I sat on that Harley that in the garage and I finally got it going. I said, this doesn't sound like a sewing machine.
Yeah.
This is what a motorcycle should sound like.
Yeah, there's a guy in my group who rides a Goldwing. He's a safety officer, and he's also a Santa at Christmas time. So he's quite a character. And like, if we're getting ready to roll out, and everybody's on their bikes and we have my riding club that I ride with is all types of bikes, obviously. So he's always funny because everyone's like, wrap up their baggers, and he's like, you can hear him turning it over. Nobody can hear his bike. Everybody has to stop. Everybody has to be quiet so we can hear him go and get the Goldwing going. But yeah, there's the reason why, riding something that is really loud and feels, primal is quite an experience. And I'm not going to lie to you. It's not, there's if you think it looks cool when you see somebody going down the road on a loud motorcycle and everybody turns and looks as they go by, it feels really cool too when you're the person on the motorcycle.
Jay, as a segue, now that we hopefully have people interested in saying, okay, these guys gave me a few basics on.
A few basics, yeah.
A few basics in there. Now you got the bike, you got the gear, let's see, where are we going to go? How do we approach it? Club riding, solo riding.
Yes.
That's a future episode.
Yeah. Yes. I want to get into that.
2 or 3 in a group, or, I'll just do solo riding, and I'll go 20 miles this way by myself. Or do I go with the pack on that during the week and they're going to do 100 miles? Stay tuned.
Yes, next coming. Yeah, I want to talk about that, and thank you guys very much, and everybody that helped out. Scott, Carlos, thank you so much. I want to we wrap up and bring things to a close. We'll share some of these notes I'll have a posted in the show notes page so you can peruse our advice. As well as take a look at pictures of some of the bikes that we talked about here today, so you can go back to that anytime. Again, thank you guys very much. Next episode, I think we've decided here we're going to talk about that, getting out of your garage. Now, who do you ride with? What does it mean? And this will lead to, I think, a couple of different episodes. We'll start we'll start broad in the next episode about, like you said, Carlos, with those different groups, and then we'll get into more of the lore and the culture and why things are the way that they are. And if you're fascinated by, why some of the things, all those different groups of riders we talked about, we'll get into some of that too, and why there are so many different, styles and things that people are passionate about. So I thank you guys again. Once again, this episode brought to you by Throttle Addict. That's Throttle Addict with a K in it. Not quite sure why that is, but we like it anyway. I recommend Throttle Addict because I like their clothing. And if you go and use code THEDUDE, you can save 15%. And let's face it, if you're listening to this show or watching this show, if you're listening to this show and you're not somehow visually disabled in some way, then you're missing out on seeing the three of us and our quite handsome cast here. But if you're watching the show, you're listening to the show, you're probably a slob. So clean yourself up, get some new clothes, throttleaddict.com with a K. It's on the website. Use code THEDUDE, save 15%. Thank you, Throttle Addict, our sponsor. We'll see how they feel about this programming and if we still have them next week. Scott, anything you got going on that you want to talk about before we let you go, man?
No, I'm just
any projects in the mix?
Buying a bike here. Well, I do have a project. I'm trying to grow a beard for the first time in my life.
Okay.
Because I'm probably going to be attending Santa training in May.
Oh, that's right. Oh, hey, wait a minute. Will you agree to be a guinea pig for me then? I'm fascinated by these beard creams I see advertised on Instagram and LinkedIn. If I buy you one of these, it promises to grow in thicker and lusher, will you test it for us and let us know what the results are?
Here's what I'll have you do. You buy one of those thicker, lusher creams. I'll use it on half my face.
Okay, we'll compare
versus the other, and we'll see how it's doing. They did get me some Instagram ad about a beard oil, so I do have some coming.
Tell you what, I'll sacrifice my beard.
You'll test it out.
I've never grown it in on the sides on my cheeks before. I don't know what if it looks like a penis or something.
Yeah, you don't know yet, right?
So I need to try it out.
George, you've got this bald spot that looks like a swastika on one side.
When he told me that he's a talent agent and he's also a Santa himself, when he said that he requires that all his Santas are real bearded, I was like, oh, I don't know about this. But I got to find out. I got to see what it's all about. So that's my big project right now, is itching my face.
Yeah, I'm really psyched that you're doing this. This is really cool.
Right. I think my wife is less psyched than you are, but we'll see what happens. All right.
That's all part of the experience.
Exactly. Yeah.
Carlos, you got anything? Any big projects? Anything exciting coming on this week?
No. We did our despite the 44-degree weather out here. We had about 10 of us escort the veterans' remains out there. We do that quite often with the Patriot Guard riders. And
that's really cool.
We were, the family is always great. So we try to do it. I'm also trying to prepare some events. I'm the coordinator for one of the national cemeteries, and so we getting ready for flag planting and some memorial services there. So. Hopefully just awareness that, there's folks out there that need our support, and, so keep you informed.
Yeah, I definitely you have to point me in the. I'm interested in the cemetery service here, so I know that I'll have to find out who I can get connected with. I have a feeling I know a couple of the groups that ride that do some of that, but I'll talk to you offline about that. Something that opens up another chance and to ride and meet some different people. So I'll let me know what the group is that coordinates that. Those.
We'll talk offline, and I'll send you some information.
All right, cool.
Very cool.
Guys, again, I really appreciate it. Thanks. I know we ran a little long again. We're getting better and tighter on our timing. I thank you guys so much for helping us bring this show to life. Thank you, everybody who's watching and joined us. I hope that you guys have a fantastic rest of your Sunday. Say hi to the families for me, and we'll talk to you soon, guys. Take care.
All right, thanks, guys.
Take care,
Cheers.
everybody.
Take care.